Next is appearances. For appearances today, we have Eric Sanzik. Please approach, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Klein. Appreciate you giving me time again here to once again discuss litter in the county. I was first here back in January regarding the same subject, and then had a long talk with Mr. Hardy and Supervisor Hardy, and he was super helpful, giving me a lot of information, connecting me with a lot of people. So especially want to thank Mr. Hardy for talking with me and staying in communication with me since then. So it's been super helpful, and you've been really good at everything that I've needed. So that's been really helpful. I think litter, we constantly hear about it, and it's, it's a recurring subject of these meetings because it really does have an impact on the community. It lowers property values, it's unattractive for businesses, and it is the most visible reflection of the health of a community. So I think it's also just a continual stain on the amazing and beautiful landscape that is Campbell County. So I've been working on this issue. I talked to a lot of people, and I just got a list of general observations of why I think it is so bad in the county, and some suggestions on how we might be able to fix the problem. In short, it really includes collection and aggregation of information, supporting and enabling prevention and enforcement, and moving cleanup programs from more going to more reactive rather than, more proactive than reactive. So first, with regards to prevention and enforcement, I think the first starting point is how we actually get information about litter complaints. Most common thing that we get, obviously, is people just complaining to a board member or contacting staff and just letting them know, hey, we saw trash on this street, and if you can, give that some attention. So that's the most common method that we know about. But then when I contacted a few people throughout the departments, I was also directed to the Engage With Us form on the website, and they're saying that's the most public and outward-facing mechanism that someone could actually give us information. But in its lifetime of existence, it's received no information about litter. So we can assume, almost anything that we do get is just by contacting staff. So I think the first part is really getting a mechanism where it's really easy for residents to actually provide us that information. And so a suggestion for that is basically like a telephone hotline for litter. It was actually recommended by Sheriff Clark back in we had the litter work session of April 12th last year. And I definitely think, so a hotline for litter, a 3-digit format would definitely be safest, most convenient, easiest for drivers to remember. And even we have, Virginia has 311 currently set up to contact your local representative, either be a city or a county non-emergency personnel. And that was really Sheriff Clark's primary concern, is he doesn't want a lot of people calling the sheriff's office just to report on litter. So that was his main point about that. And I think it's really helpful to get additional information in that regard. In terms of just everything I try to bring up is really supposed to be budget neutral. I don't think we need to set up a huge call center or anything like that. It could be even a voicemail, just letting people know that we check it twice a day and it's directed to the right person. So I don't think that would be a huge cost there. If for some reason we cannot figure out how to get 311 directed to, actually right now 311 is being directed to City of Hampton and Newport News. So there would be a way to get that redirected to our own county staff. But if for some reason we can't figure out how to do that, at least establish some type of 800 number. And then after that is established, to have signs posted throughout the county to report litter or littering through that hotline number. I don't think many signs would be necessary. Only a few would probably be needed on the borders of the county or throughout. Definitely not the big ugly street signs that Amherst County has. They're just huge and they really don't do much good. Or the temporary digital signs. I think something small and concise would be sufficient. So it would obviously first be a mechanism for residents to report litter, and it would definitely increase the amount of information we receive on where there are problems. And it's super helpful because it's likely that 80% of our litter is coming from 20% of our residents. And getting additional information on that is going to be helpful to formulating long-term solutions. Also, those signs would be a deterrent, knowing that anyone who is littering, simply anyone could easily report them. That's an additional deterrent there. And it indirectly does serve that littering is illegal, obviously. During the litter work session, with regards to prevention, it was discussed whether those the reminder that littering is illegal, those road signs, if they were effective. So I did some research, and there are scholarly studies out there that have done research on them. And not only have they usually found that, the only studies that I could find were proved that they were not only ineffective, but they could actually be counterproductive, simply because those types of signs are really not a deterrent for laws that are commonly known to exist, such as litter. And then when they are put up in an area where it seems like the law is not enforced, it actually increases violation of that norm. So I can forward you some of the studies that I found in that. But I think that type of thinking in general just is general lack of understanding of the type of resident who would repeatedly intentionally litter in the county. They are either of such a deficient mental capacity or they just lack such a respect for the county that telling them that litter is illegal or keep Campbell County beautiful, like that's not likely to change any behavior. So I don't think we need to end those cultural campaigns, especially keep Campbell County beautiful. I mean, those are great campaigns and they're definitely helpful in the long term. But I think we should put an end to the idea that they're going to solve the litter problem. And it might have actually even created a false sense of accomplishment that we're actually doing something about it when we don't even know how effective it's going to be. And every department that I contacted and every person that I did contact regarding this issue, I was always asking, like, what metrics do you have set up? How do you even know if our programs are effective, and what standards are you using? And I really found no measures for effectiveness or anything on any of our programs. Where I do think education is useful and can be utilized is obviously once the litter hotline is set up to publicize that and reminder of potential sentences for littering offenders. And then also I think we could announce financial reimbursement for appearances in court. And that was one thing when I talked to the sheriff's office, they had a really hard time. It's like, even if they had someone who actually reported littering, they know who it was, you can ID the person, they still had trouble getting them in court to follow up on that. So assistance in that process. Also, a reminder that dash cameras, that is permissible evidence in court as well, that I confirmed, simply because, especially if the dash cameras, if it's getting a license plate, you have identification there, and per the Virginia code, that is enforceable just with that type of evidence. And I don't think many people are aware of that type of evidence that they could be using, and especially since it's becoming much more standard even on newer vehicles, and for insurance purposes, people are using a lot of dash cameras. Also, we ever actually do be able to issue a ticket for littering and conviction, publicizing that, like actually showing somehow that we are enforcing these laws would be helpful. And then also, lastly, I think in terms of education, getting information out about how people can actually get trash removal services at their residences. That's one thing that would definitely cut down on a lot of trash being thrown out of the trucks due to unsecured loads on the way to transfer sites. If we had more people that were actually having their trash picked up at their residence, that would help quite a bit, I'm assuming. And also, like, anytime we send out mailed notices or any kind of notification to help people be able to reach and contact companies that would be able to pick up trash at the residence would be huge benefit. So obviously, in terms of enforcement, there are obviously thousands of pieces of evidence throughout Campbell County that demonstrate continual violation of the litter laws. But during the litter work session, it was announced that from 2016 to 2021, over 5 years, that only 7 tickets were issued for littering. So I was curious about that. I called to get more updated information. And even in the last 3 years from now, only 3 tickets have been issued under Virginia Code 33.1-346. There are 3 other codes that cover intentional littering and unsecured loads, and no tickets have been issued for any of that. So it's clear that we're unable to enforce a lot of these laws in our county. And it's particularly important because enforcement is one of the most effective methods of deterrence. And right now we just see very little of either of those. So I think enforcement is really tough to think of solutions and suggestions on how to do that better. But I think it could be more focused if we do have programs established to collect and aggregate information, attempt to crowdsource evidence, and encourage residents to participate in the enforcement process. So we always have a lot of discussions here about reporting where trash is bad in certain areas or on what streets. But not a whole lot of solutions from all my research, it doesn't seem like a lot of solutions have been attempted for in terms of prevention and enforcement. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done there. With regards to our cleanup program, so obviously we do have VDOT, most important cleanup program, since they do proactively clear litter anytime that they're mowing. And they mow our primary roads about 4 times a year. And anytime they do that, they're always picking up litter, which is super helpful. It's unfortunate, though, that most secondary roads just don't have wide sections to even do any mowing. So a lot of secondary roads are neglected and therefore don't have proactive litter removal by VDOT in those sections. Pretty much everything else is done on a reactive basis. For that program, VDOT has a budget of around $100,000 per year, and then a list of primary and secondary roads that they're allowed to actually clear litter on. I reviewed the list of roads and did some comparison, and it looked like the list that VDOT has, it's really only a small portion of our secondary roads, and it even has some low traffic roads. So if you look at the VDOT GIS, secondary roads in our county, about only 25% are over 500 average daily traffic. So you have like 25% of the roads really are being used a lot in terms of just the secondary roads. But on the VDOT list, you have roads like Mount Airy Drive. Mount Airy Drive has 240, Camp Hideaway Road has 350, and Old Rustburg Road has 480. So I think we definitely need to look at the list that VDOT has and try to get that reviewed and expanded. For one example, English Tavern, which is not on the list, that's over 3,000 average daily traffic, and it's not on the VDOT list. So there just seems to be some disconnect there, and maybe how the roads were selected in the first place and why why roads haven't been added to there, especially something for English Tavern. I mean, there's many layers of litter that have been there for a very long time. I think we also should explore options on how to increase the budget for the Campbell County cleanup through the VDOT's program. And then also once that is established, we can then schedule reoccurring cleanups of secondary roads that have the highest levels of litter to the maximum budget amounts, which definitely does not seem to be happening right now. It's also a good point to bring up a side note that in some of my reviewing the prior meetings where this issue has been brought up, is that there's sometimes attempts to normalize the issue. And I think that it would be really helpful if we really reject the notion that because other counties have a problem, that is therefore more acceptable that Campbell County has a problem. Because that's definitely been mentioned at other meetings. And it's unfortunate. For the inmate program, that was some great news we got last month that the inmate program was restarted since it was been suspended since COVID lockdown. And that was the most common response that I got for everyone that I talked to, is that it seemed like the current amount of litter that we had in Campbell County right now was due to the fact that the inmate program was shut down because of the COVID suspension. But looking back in the history of these meetings, it was clear that even in 2019 and early 2020, before COVID, we've had the same issues. I mean, I saw in these meetings in 2019 for January, February, March, and April, we had supervisors Hardy and Borland mention large amounts of litter. In February 2019, we had a resident from Concord who spoke on the issue. And then again in February 2020, Mr. Hardy brought up large amounts of litter on various streets. All that's before the COVID lockdown. So I think that the idea that now that the inmate program is restarted, it's going to solve the litter problems is not reasonable to believe. But with regards to that program specifically, so the jail has a limited amount of inmates who are even eligible to participate in the program, and then a smaller pool of inmates who are willing to do so. I found out that when they actually do participate, what they get is good time credit, a $1 per day housing fee that's waived, and then time off their sentence if they're eligible, and also a care package once a week that alternates between hygiene items and food. So I think we definitely need to figure out how we can expand the inmate participation in the program. And I think there might be many options out there, but the most obvious one is the care packages, to try to expand the care package or enhance the care package, anything to maybe create more of an incentive for other inmates. In terms of cost to benefit ratio, the money that we would spend on that and the manual labor hours received would probably be pretty high cost to benefit ratio. With regards to our volunteer programs for litter pickup, so again, we had great news last month. We had Public Works had a huge volunteer pickup day with Liberty University, and I saw the pictures and it was a massive turnout. And so that was a great job on all fronts there, and it was really good to see. We also do have the volunteer programs of Green Teams and Give Us Five. But I checked and really no metrics were established prior to the initiation of those programs. So it's going to be difficult to determine the effectiveness of those campaigns. But the feedback that I did get was that those programs typically showed that volunteers usually just remove litter near their own homes, which would actually have a huge impact if you're in an urban environment, but much less so for suburban areas and even less so for rural areas, as is much of Campbell County. So I think those programs are obviously always going to be useful and they should always be praised, but the nature of volunteer programs is intermittent and unreliable for long-term solutions that require manual labor and many hours of work. While promoting these programs and encouraging and praising the volunteers, we also need to be cautious about depending on such programs for long-term solutions. With regard to Public Works, the litter programs or the litter efforts in Public Works, so when I came in here in January to address this board, during the public comment for the budget, I requested that resources be dedicated to litter removal programs, and I was told in response that I was echoing the sentiments of many residents and that board and staff needed to create more capacity for litter removal programs. The next month, we actually had the litter cleanup pilot program that was announced, and that was good to see. And actually, the announcement for that program noted that there's going to be litter cleanup along roads leading to all transfer sites. However, litter throughout the county, litter is throughout the county. It's not just on those roads, and so I think it was encouraging to see a new idea, but it seemed like a very narrowly focused pilot program, something that could definitely be expanded. And as a general observation for Public Works, I thought it was really helpful to know and surprising for me to find that they really don't have anyone who is designated for litter removal programs. The Director of Public Works will be managing the litter pilot program, but all other employees in the department don't have anything regarding litter in their job descriptions. Other than the director, there are 44 employees in Public Works, averaging a salary of $30,000 per year, budgeted at $700,000 last year, and not one employee is responsible for litter removal in the county. Also, the Public Works responsibilities listed in the budget's office function don't mention anything about litter. So if this issue actually is a priority for the county and the board, I wouldn't expect to see the subject neglected from budget documentation and employment documentation. Instead, as a side project and on a reactive basis, Public Works picks up litter when time and resources allows, on a reactive basis, and really mostly during the winter. During spring, summer, and fall seasons, parks and playing fields consumes quite a bit of staff time. So this is actually repeated in the recent budget summary. Public Works to pick up what it can when it can. That just does not sound like something for which we are creating more capacity. And in the FY23 budget summary, it also mentions that we're budgeting for more employees and more salary expenditures and more taxpayer dollars for Public Works, but those additional employees are not even dedicated to specifically address litter, as is stated in the budget document. Those additional Public Works employees were even mentioned in the section for litter suggestions in the budget. And it was basically used as a pretext to add more employees in the department. And then those employees were not even dedicated to actually solving the problem. So I mean, the expectation definitely wouldn't be that we're going to have anyone doing 8 hours a day, 5 days a week out there picking up litter. I know that's just not reasonable. There is a reason why we can't even get inmates to pick up litter. I mean, it's tough work. So I wouldn't expect anything like that. But if we were going to make a hire that's specifically to address litter issues, one supervisor to oversee programs would have been helpful, or it may be more part-time employees to pick up litter once every 2 weeks or once every month or something like that would have been farly more prudent. But given that missed opportunity, I think one option and suggestion I would have would be that the current employees in the department for Public Works would be responsible for litter removal in some capacity. The budget neutral option would be a rotation of current Public Works employees, all secondary roads, all seasons, all year. With 44 employees, if you had 2 employees 2 days a week, that's only around 4 days per year per employee, and that's not a large ask there. So it's an idea that wouldn't require one additional dollar spent, but it would require a shift in priorities. We also don't have any systems or record keeping in place to evaluate the current level of litter throughout the county. And staff, what I was told is that staff are simply observant while traveling to and from county facilities to determine where litter needs to be picked up. And also in terms of record keeping, Public Works or VDOT neither actually maintain a record of what streets are cleared of litter. And that prevents really any analysis of removal program effectiveness, and also prevents accountability. I mean, it was mentioned recently, VDOT contractors, they cleared Depot Road, but there are many sections that were left with trash remaining, and even one section just west of Lazy Creeks that has 2 full-size tires sitting right on the side of the road. They were there before and they're there after the VDOT contractors came through. But when you don't even maintain a record of who's cleaning what, when, and where, it's hard to hold anyone accountable, whether it's contractors or employees or anything. So I think it also eliminates the possibility that we can track how fast litter accumulates throughout the county and where it accumulates fastest, which would really be helpful information to be able to not only help enforcement, but also the cleanup programs. The pilot program does note that the amount of trash is to be recorded, but that should definitely be expanded, I would think, into the type and number of workers, obviously the date of when it was cleared and the amount of trash that was removed would be also helpful as it was stated. So given that we did have 2 additional employees hired under this new budget under the pretext of litter removal, I think it could still be reasonable to at least designate someone in Public Works and the current Public Works staff as a supervisor of litter programs. They would receive calls on the litter hotline voicemail to record detailed reports. They could maintain the record of what streets have been cleared of litter by Public Works and VDOT with the type and number of workers, date clearing, amount of trash removed. I think also to survey secondary roads of at least 500 average daily traffic, which is really only 25% of secondary roads, in addition to the roads that have received complaints and recording the amount of litter on multiple levels of severity. They could also be monitoring trucks near the transfer sites to check for unsecure load. That would obviously be informative at first, but maybe possible enforcement after some warnings. And then I did confirm with the sheriff's office that if we had someone in the county bringing large trash bags to the sheriff's office, that they would make an attempt to try to identify the owner or the transfer agent, which would be helpful in terms of enforcement. And then a supervisor of cleanup programs could even then obviously manage and oversee all cleanup efforts and litter removal programs. That would actually even allow judges to sentence residents convicted of littering with the penalty of litter cleanup community service hours. I think that's not only real justice, but it's just illogical that we don't have programs established that those caught with littering cannot be charged, cannot be sentenced right now with litter cleanup community service hours. And we should be able to make that possible. And really those without a criminal record, if they have a clean record, they wouldn't require security, but just supervision. And those with criminal record could just be included with the inmate pickup program. Finally, I think there's in general a lack of ownership at the county level with regards to the cleanup program. So VDOT definitely owns the primary roads since Public Works doesn't do anything on primary roads due to safety concerns, which is definitely understandable. But in terms of secondary roads, it seems like responsibility is designated to both. And I feel like it leads to a dispersion of responsibility and then a lack of ownership for the condition of secondary roads. So I would suggest that Public Works basically takes ownership of secondary roads and then utilizes VDOT to the fullest extent possible for prevention, enforcement, and cleanup efforts. So in closing, some of these suggestions are certainly better than others. But if we don't start implementing solutions, we'll continue to see trash scattered throughout our beautiful county. We need to go beyond the Band-Aid fixes of just responding to complaints about litter and moving towards solutions that will prevent complaints from rising in the first place. It's obvious that we could spend tens of millions of dollars building a new middle school or constructing public safety buildings and even renovating animal shelters. But when we drive to and from those facilities, our roads will still be scattered with trash. So it would be understandable if this board and staff were to say that the state of trash scattered throughout the county is not a priority. And I think that would at least make some sense. But the feedback received has been quite different, that it is a priority, but it doesn't seem like our current programs reflect that priority. I also think that the pilot program, again, while it was very welcome to see movement towards something new that we haven't been doing before, it was still very narrowly focused and should be expanded. So yeah, I just thank you for your time, and I'm open for any questions or comments.
Thank you, Mr. Sanzik. Great suggestions. I took a lot of notes, and I'll be going through these with staff and other board members. Do any other board members have questions or comments for Mr. Sanzik?
I have one, Mr. Chairman. If I may.
Please.
Yes, sir. You mentioned unsecure loads earlier, and to me, that's almost a bigger concern than the litter. Like you said, it's going to be very hard to do anything about litter. We don't expect our law enforcement to be out there looking for somebody throwing a gum wrapper out the window. But recently, and I mean very recently, I've driven by empty boxes, a mattress, brush, bags on the road. It seems like there's an increase in unsecure loads. And I don't know if that's due to people just putting so much into the back of their trucks over and above the bed and hoping that it will stay on there, or if it's an increase in trailers that people pull today and they don't really hold that debris as well as trucks do. But with them things flying out of there, if someone was behind them, I mean, we're talking now accidents, injury, possible death. And also, I've noticed a lot more illegal dumping in areas like cul-de-sacs and stuff throughout my part of Campbell County.
Mhm.
So those are the things that I almost feel like if there was a way to address that in some way, whether a police officer is driving down the road, he sees somebody pulling a trailer full of debris or the back of the truck and it's 3 feet above the rails, not to pull them over to give them a ticket, but just explain how dangerous that situation is without tie downs. So those are the kind of things that I believe we could address in some way without spending a lot of resources or man hours doing it.
Right. Yeah, no, it's a really good point. And actually, so if you look up the Virginia code on unsecure loads, it basically does say that the person responsible and who can be charged with littering, it's either the operator or the owner. So if you have someone who's just like, oh, I let someone borrow my truck, it wasn't me, and you just have everyone passing the buck, you actually do, in terms of enforcement, you can still ticket even the owner of the vehicle. And so that's where I think it becomes really important in terms of how do you get that type of information. A dash cams would be one easy way to get that, even if someone reports littering through a hotline or whatever, and then they're able to, they are encouraged to come to court to actually, testify that they did see this, they did see this occur and they can identify that person. I think that's one of the, it's definitely a large source of litter. But the hard part about it is just that we're not collecting information right now. We have very little sources of records of like how actually litter is actually being accumulated. So it's difficult to nail down those type of instances and then be able to take it in terms of a prevention or enforcement mechanism. So particularly for bringing large trash bags to the sheriff's office. I mean, an owner could say, I don't bring my trash, to the transfer site. I pay this service to do that. And then you can start actually having, companies on record where it's like, we know you picked up this person's trash. We saw it on the way to the transfer site. You can start holding the companies available if it is, whoever it might be. But that was very encouraging when I talked with the sheriff's office that they did say, yes, if we're able, we will go through big, large bags of trash. And if we can identify someone in there, we will follow up on it. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just
sir.
a few comments. I'd like to thank you, Eric, it's a tremendous amount of research and time that you put into this topic. So I appreciate very much your passion and love for the community and the quality of the community. So thank you for all that work. I think you've made some good suggestions here. And I think, one of the takeaways that I really love is, and because I made a lot of notes, but I think just creating a very strategic plan. I think that Mr. Stokes and his staff has taken a strategic approach to some areas, but we need to evaluate its effectiveness over time. And then we also need to look for expansion of that. That way we do have a schedule between Public Works and VDOT where you're not working over one another. You're working with one another.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a great suggestion.
Any other board members? Thank you, Mr. Zanzi.
Thank you.